You're listening to the Health Courage Collective podcast, episode 34, Angiogenesis. Welcome to the Health Courage Collective podcast, the show for women who are too busy to slog through hours of generalized, inapplicable, and often contradictory health information, but too smart to ignore that a few minutes of focused attention now can prevent years of suffering in the future. I'm your host, Christina Hackett, a pharmacist who doesn't want you to live on prescriptions, a certified coach specifically trained to maximize your potential, and a compulsive learner obsessed with preventative, cutting-edge, holistic, and integrative medicine. I'm on a mission to increase your physical and mental resilience so you can fearlessly look forward to your next 40-plus limitless years. Your time is now. Let's go. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you're here today. What is going on? Have you had a good week? Have you been able to use energy management to make anything in your daily or monthly routine easier or more fun? Have you at least thought about when your mind is best suited to the tasks you schedule throughout your day? Do you know what your most important work is and do it at the most ideal time of day? That's like you. You're awesome. Today we're going to talk about angiogenesis. Yes, the wait is finally over. Just kidding. I don't think there are many people anywhere who get super excited to learn about angiogenesis. Most people don't even know what it is. But if you take these few minutes today to learn about it and then implement some smart strategies to keep your angiogenesis in the Goldilocks zone, you can sidestep a few little annoyances in your future like cancer, Alzheimer's disease, stroke, macular degeneration, heart failure, and chronic wounds. Pretty cool, right? Angiogenesis is the body's process for making and maintaining blood vessels to supply your tissues with the nutrients that are carried around in your bloodstream. It's so important to your life that it started before you were even conceived. If you remember our discussion a couple weeks ago about how your rising estrogen during the first half of your cycle causes a thickening of the endometrial lining of the uterus, that lining is full of new blood vessels ready to nourish a fertilized egg, thanks to angiogenesis. And within 8 days of implantation of a fertilized egg, a completely new vascular organ called the placenta is manufactured via angiogenesis to bring mom's life-giving blood to the fetus. Angiogenesis then goes nuts for 9 months, completely forming an entire circulatory system from scratch, then filling up each organ correctly with all it needs to thrive. Ridiculously amazing. Toward the end of pregnancy, the placenta releases something called soluble FLT1, which is an anti-angiogenesis factor. A little alert that the 3D print process is almost complete. If you've ever skinned your knee and pulled the scab off prematurely and then seen the bright red glistening tissue under there, this was angiogenesis in action, forming thousands of new blood vessels to restore the injured tissue back to health. Pretty freaking cool. It, of course, also works with any tissue injury, cuts, surgery, heart attacks. The trigger is hypoxia, or low oxygen supply to the area. Hypoxia triggers the release of proteins called growth factors, which stimulate angiogenesis to create new blood vessels to reperfuse the injured area. The cells that line your blood vessels are called endothelial cells. We'll talk more about your endothelium in the future because you can't live a long, energetic life if your endothelial cells are not healthy. And they're one of the most common types of cell in your body. But the growth factors trigger your endothelial cells to drill a little hole in the vein they're in and escape out toward the injured area that's releasing the growth factors. They leave in an orderly line and divide and multiply along the way, eventually creating a little tube toward the injured area. And thus a new capillary or tiny blood vessel is born. And the injured area can be repaired. Those new blood vessels could possibly last for a lifetime. There's a bit more to it than this. Periocytes need to come form around the outside of the endothelial cells, etc., but you get the idea. Once blood starts flowing again, angiogenesis is turned off, and everyone lives happily ever after. The angiogenesis system is constantly on the lookout for situations where more blood vessels are needed, like lift some heavy stuff, then do it again, and it senses that your muscles need more blood flow to help them grow so you can adapt to this increased work requirement. Healing, repairing, muscle building, growing. Sounds pretty good, right? Let's turn up the juice on this angiogenesis thing. Well, kind of like when you first hear a new Ed Sheeran song and you think it's great, but hearing it all day, every day is not so great. I don't know what it is about him specifically, but it seems like that has happened to me multiple times with his songs. Too much of a good thing. Way too much. At first, being barefoot on the grass and told, "Darling, you look perfect tonight," sounds so sweet. But then hearing it all day, every day, makes you sure that you'll use the light of 1,000 stars to stab the beating heart of anyone who suggests that you place your head there, right? So it is with angiogenesis. We need a functional dimmer switch in order to protect us from ourselves. I've mentioned before that we all have cancer cells inside of us, all of us. In his book, Eat to Beat Disease, Dr. William Lee describes how autopsies of people who have never been diagnosed with cancer show that 40% of women between ages 40 and 50 had microscopic breast tumors, 50% of men between ages 50 and 60 had microscopic cancer in their prostate, and 100% of people over the age of 70 had microscopic cancers in their thyroid gland. The cancers we all have inside of us right now probably aren't a problem at all, as long as our angiogenesis dimmer switch is working correctly. Microscopic tumors can't get bigger without the ability to recruit and set up their own private blood supply to nourish their growth. We've known since 1974 that as long as no blood vessels grow to feed tumors, the cancer cells remain dormant and harmless. In lab experiments, when tumors hijack angiogenesis and get it to form blood vessels to feed a cluster of cancer cells, a tumor can grow up to 16,000 times in size in only 2 weeks. Yikes. And those vessels can also provide an exit route for cancer cells to spread to the lymph and bloodstream and metastasize. Kind of a tangent, but super interesting, is that excessive angiogenesis can actually be a problem in coronary artery disease. So if an artery in the heart, a coronary artery, gets clogged with cholesterol-y plaque, it's not just like gunk in a pipe. It's a living growth that relies on the formation of new blood vessels via angiogenesis in order to expand. I had never heard this before. The angiogenesis, called coronary plaque neovascularization, allows the plaque to thicken and block more of the coronary artery, and also makes the plaque more fragile and likely to rupture. A rupture causes a potentially fatal heart attack. Unchecked angiogenesis in the eye causes blindness from both macular degeneration and diabetic retinopathy. Rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, and psoriasis all have to do with abnormally high amounts of angiogenesis too. Alzheimer's disease involves excessive angiogenesis of the vessels that release neurotoxins in the brain. Even obesity is partially made possible by excess angiogenesis. So, angiogenesis is bad, right? Well, not really. If we can't ramp up the angiogenesis on demand, the blood supply to our nerves might diminish, causing the nerves to die and cause neuropathy. Slow healing and chronic wounds are caused by insufficient angiogenesis too. If you have atherosclerosis, your body can create natural bypasses and grow new blood vessels to nourish your heart and brain if angiogenesis is working correctly. But if it's not, your heart or brain tissue will die. So why bother talking about this then? Because you can influence your body's ability to stay in the Goldilocks zone of angiogenesis. And if you don't, you could die. For real. Dr. William Lee wrote a book all about how to do this, and I thought it sounded interesting enough to get it from the library and check it out. I read a lot of books, especially medical and health optimization books, and this is definitely the first one I've ever read that had an endorsement on the back from Bono. What? How'd Dr. Lee pull that one off? Then, inside the front cover, I saw that there's also a quote from The Edge. I was curious why U2 was so into angiogenesis of all things. It turns out that while Dr. William Lee is the head of the Angiogenesis Foundation, The Edge is the director of the foundation. Because in 2006, The Edge, whose real name is David Evans, in case you wanted to know, his daughter, who was 7 at the time, was diagnosed with leukemia. Dr. Lee helped direct dietary changes in addition to her chemotherapy treatments, and she's now healthy and 24 years old. The Edge says he knows we can do better than just chemotherapy for cancer, and pushes for funding for the Angiogenesis Foundation to research exactly how whole foods, combinations of those foods, and even the way they are prepared can influence our health. Sounds like he still hasn't found what he's looking for, but he still has a desire to uncover the mysterious ways of the body in the name of love. Ugh, that's so dumb. What would have made more sense to try and fit in there about angiogenesis would have been Sunday, Bloody Sunday. Should have thought that through a little more. The Angiogenesis Foundation was started in 1994, and they're still doing research. They have some information on their website about studies they've done on COVID-19, because a lot of the damage it causes, both acutely and part of the long hauler syndrome, is to the endothelium. COVID causes what's called intussusceptive angiogenesis, splitting one blood vessel into two. Weird times. But it's definitely not just a respiratory infection, it's a vascular disease. I like what Dr. Lee said in an interview he did with The Edge for the Washington Post. He said, "It's tempting for all of us in biomedicine to want the magic bullet, the one thing to make everything else go away. But the body of research has shown that both health and disease are much more complicated." End quote. So true. The foods you eat can be leveraged for both the prevention of disease and the lessening of disease that has already started. Like the little Edge, or what would you call the Edge's daughter? Edge Jr.? The Edgette. I like that one. The Edgette recovered better from leukemia with the additional support of a therapeutic diet. More of the diseases we've talked about, especially cancer, are from too much angiogenesis. Anti-angiogenic foods that help decrease excessive angiogenesis don't prevent healthy angiogenesis. You won't get chronic wounds from eating them, but there is real research to show that they can help with angiogenic diseases. The number one anti-angiogenic food is soy. I have major reservations about soy, but several people who are way smarter than I am are big soy advocates. My problem is that 95% of soy planted in the US is genetically modified. So if you're into soy, or you can find organic soy, edamame, soy milk, soy nuts, tofu, miso, tempeh, and our old friend natto from our nitric oxide episode are all good soy products. Soy contains different anti-angiogenic isoflavones, including genistein, diadesin, equal, and glycolin. Not sure if I said any of those right. These isoflavones are in higher concentrations in fermented soy products. Maybe it's time for me to start eating natto after all. There's also a dietary supplement called genistein concentrated polysaccharide, or GCP, that has been found in lab studies to directly kill prostate cancer and lymphoma cells. Soy consumption reduces the risk of cardiovascular disease by 16% and the risk of breast cancer recurrence by 32%. Studies used 10 grams of soy a day, which would be about a whole cup of soy milk every day. You've heard before that tomatoes contain lycopene. Lycopene is very anti-angiogenic. There is 5 times more lycopene in the skin of the tomato, so leave the skin on, and the lycopene can only be well absorbed if the tomato is cooked. Cherry tomatoes have 24% more lycopene than other kinds, except the San Marzino heirloom tomato. Broccoli is very anti-angiogenic, and studies have shown that eating 2 cups of broccoli per week is associated with reduced risk of many cancers, including lymphoma, breast, ovarian, esophageal, lung, prostate, and melanoma. Kale also has been shown to decrease risk of cancer. Stone fruits like peaches, plums, nectarines, apricots, cherries, mangoes, and lychees are anti-angiogenic. Plums have the most polyphenols. My boys like to try fruits that we don't see in our part of the world too often, so I got us this whole big carton of lychee at Costco a couple of months ago. They were pretty fun looking, but the ones we had didn't really taste like anything. Not bad, but not really good either. I assume they're better fresher. I wouldn't have guessed that they have a lot of polyphenols, as the fruit was just plain white. As it turns out, studies have shown that eating an apple a day can actually decrease your risk for cancer. Granny Smith, Rainette, Little Queen, and Red Delicious apples have the highest levels of polyphenols. Strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, blueberries, and cranberries all have anti-angiogenic properties. The black raspberry specifically has been shown in clinical trials to improve the precancerous condition called Barrett's esophagus, and also precancerous colon polyps. Ruby gem, Camarosa, and Osmanli strawberries are the most anti-angiogenic. They are all also the most sour of strawberries. Seafood can be very anti-angiogenic. Hake. I'm not at all a seafood fan and just Googled how to pronounce that. Sea cucumber, manila clams, big-eye tuna, yellowtail, sea bass, bluefin tuna, sturgeon caviar, and salmon fish roe are the most anti-angiogenic. Tilapia is the least. Remember back in episode 21 when we talked about how great vitamin K2 is? In addition to all the other great things I talked about it doing, it turns out that it's also a potent anti-angiogenic vitamin. Dr. Lee lists a bunch of studies in his book that I won't bore you with that show that its anti-cardiovascular disease and anti-cancer properties are due to anti-angiogenesis. He suggests dark chicken meat as a potential source of vitamin K2. While processed meats have been declared a carcinogen by the WHO, there are two forms of ham that are okay by Dr. Lee: prosciutto di Parma from Italy and jamón ibérico de Balatona from Spain. If you're not eating one of those two specific air-cured hams, you're doing yourself harm. Dr. Lee recommends Munster Gouda, Camembert, Edam, Stilton, Emmental, and Jarlsberg as your cheeses of choice when planning your meals. Can you guess why? You're so smart. Vitamin K2. It really does a body good. Most cheese does not, but the vitamin K2 in some of them does. Remember, you can also get vitamin K2 as a supplement, which I think is a good idea to do. Next, no surprise here, olive oil has healthy polyphenols that prevent excessive angiogenesis. You've probably heard this before, but you want cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil from a reputable source. I know I've heard before that a lot of olive oils are adulterated with regular vegetable oil, so you have to be very careful about the product you choose. Monovarietal olive oils made from only one type of olive are the best, if you can find them, especially from Koroneiki olives from Greece, Moraldo olives from Italy, or Picule olives from Spain. They also taste better, apparently. Also, not surprisingly, nuts are very anti-angiogenic. Walnuts, pecans, almonds, cashews, pistachios, macadamia, and pine nuts all make the nice list. Not peanuts, which you know are legumes, and, incidentally, often have aflatoxins, which is sad, because I love peanuts and peanut butter. Anyhow, tree nuts are good, like really good. One study of 826 cancer patients showed a 57% reduced risk of death among patients who eat 2 to 3 servings of nuts per week compared to those who don't. And another study of 478,000 people showed 1.5 servings of nuts and seeds per day reduced risk of colon cancer by 31%. One serving in these studies was 11 walnuts, 26 cashews, 17 macadamia nuts, or 4 tablespoons of pine nuts. Specific studies have not been conducted on humans using herbs, but rosemary, oregano, turmeric, licorice, and cinnamon all have anti-angiogenic ingredients that have been shown to have anti-angiogenic effects on tumors in laboratory studies. So use lots of herbs. I got this really cool indoor garden for Christmas, so I'm so excited to have lots of fresh herbs growing that I can cook with. They taste way better, and I don't have to buy those dumb plastic clamshell package things that are expensive and you have to use within a few days or your basil starts turning black. I love fresh herbs. My husband told me yesterday when I got home from work that I'm more excited to see my plants when I come home than my family. There may be some truth to that. They're super fun. But back on track. I saved the best food for last. Scientists at UC Davis have shown that procyanidins have potent anti-angiogenic effects, stopping the inappropriate signaling to blood vessels to grow. Where do you find procyanidins? In chocolate, of course. You already know that you want the darkest chocolate you can get, and the UC Davis experiment showed that not all cocoa is the same. Some suppliers had twice the potency of others, but they didn't give us any advice for now about picking the best cocoa supplier. Just be judicious about your dark chocolate purchasing and consumption. Really quick here, when the problem is too little angiogenesis, foods can be used to support more angiogenesis, and as long as you're living a healthy lifestyle and not eating highly processed foods, the consumption of pro-angiogenic foods that are healthy for you won't override your regulatory system to cause tumor growth. Remember that the diseases of low angiogenesis are ischemic heart and brain disease, peripheral artery disease, chronic wounds, erectile dysfunction, and alopecia. Pro-healthy angiogenic foods include foods with ursolic acid, which is found in ginseng, peppermint, rosemary, apple peels, sultana raisins, dried cherries, dried cranberries, and dried blueberries. Foods rich in quercetin are also helpful. I love quercetin and take it as a supplement, but quercetin-containing foods are capers, onions, red leaf lettuce, hot green chili peppers, cranberries, black plums, and apples. Beta-D-glucan in barley is helpful, as are foods with lignin secoisolariciresinol diglucoside. Say that 5 times fast. SDG foods are flax, sunflower, sesame, pumpkin, and chia seeds. So, there you have it. Angiogenesis. I think it's a good thing to be aware of. Maybe you can use it as a dinner party conversation starter. You'll look really smart. If it's cool enough for the edge, it's probably cool enough for whoever you're going to need to make small talk with. But seriously, you won't be able to be your best self and contribute to the world in a meaningful way for decades to come if your angiogenesis system gets out of whack. I also just think having little reminders now and then that what foods you choose to consume really do matter, and not just for the sake of gaining or losing weight. There are all these amazingly cool processes going on inside our bodies without us even being aware of them. But if we put processed garbage in our body, even if it fits within our calorie or macro counting plan, those amazing processes can get screwed up. Our moment-to-moment choices really do matter. Choosing to eat some berries and nuts instead of something that comes in a package you have to unwrap makes a difference. Compound those tiny effects over decades, and the difference it makes might be the development of robust blood flow to a tumor, or not. Thank you so much for being here today. That's like you, to take a few minutes now to learn what you can do to prevent possible major problems in the future. You've got important work to do. The world needs you to keep yourself in great condition. Next week, we're going to talk about stressing yourself on purpose. Until then, keep your angiogenesis in the Goldilocks zone and don't be normal. Thank you so much for tuning into the Health Courage Collective podcast. I am truly honored that you have paid me the enormous compliment of your time and attention. I would be so grateful if you would share this podcast with someone you know and subscribe so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only. Statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Christina Hackett and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse events by use of information contained herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.